Happy Friday, everybody. Take a look. We got everybody in the house. Nice to see you guys.
Wow,
What's
nice
going
to
on,
see
y'all?
Saagar.
Right?
Oh, well, thank you. No, I appreciate it. We had to move some things around, but definitely had to be here.
Thanks for
Saagar is a
slumming it with
busy
the Friday
man.
crew.
No,
Saagar
I
is
just
a
have a
busy
very
man.
rigid. I just have a very, very rigid schedule, and as you guys know, with my sleep schedule and other things, I'm very reluctant to move things around. But sometimes that's what things get called for here.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things going on. Many market moves that are kind of disturbing, and China's announcing new tariffs, and so we'll take a look at that stuff. We've got big Supreme Court, unanimous Supreme Court decision. Last Friday, we actually talked to the lawyer for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is the immigrant who was wrongfully, the administration even admitted, wrongfully sent to that prison in El Salvador. The question was whether or not they would have to do anything to come back. And the Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, says you have to, and this word is key, facilitate his return. So really significant there. We're also getting a look at the government's quote-unquote case against Mahmoud Khalil, which is revealing in the many things it doesn't say and doesn't argue. So we'll take a look at that. And then Saagar in particular, very, very interested in this Dave Smith Douglas Murray debate on Joe Rogan. You want to give a little preview, Saagar?
I'm heated. As I said, I've got my schedule. I'm at the gym, ready for my cardio, and so I see this thing flash on my Spotify. I was like, Douglas Murray. I don't really like the guy, but I'll decide. Within the first 10 minutes, I'm texting Dave. I'm furious. I'm tweeting. I'm furious. My entire workout has been screwed up, and I'm enraged. I had to sit there and just
work out harder.
I did
say,
afterwards.
Yeah,
afterwards, because my blood was so hot over this entire thing. It was every characteristic, and I've been so reluctant to enter this so-called woke right debate because I find it so tedious and annoying. Emily, I'm sure you find it similarly, but this is the best example to me of somebody who is, but double standards, all of the tropes of actual wokeism, like in terms of lived experience and ad hominem attacks and expert, trolling or whatever, when you yourself are not even an expert. So we'll get to it, but yeah, I'm upset about it.
I guess I'm just like, I don't know how it's even a debate at this point about the quote unquote woke right. Like, how is it even a debate? I mean, and they've gone way further than the craziest wokesters could have ever imagined with regard to like using the apparatus of the state to achieve their goals.
Yeah, but the thing is, Krystal, is that as you understand it, the people who are pushing it, like Douglas, are the woke right. The crazy thing is they're the ones who coined the term for people who are against, or not even against, who want. They're the ones who coined the term for people who are like, hey, like maybe we can talk about Israel or Ukraine
or immigration.
I don't even understand.
They are the ones who created it. They're like, and that's actually part of what makes it so maddening. And like I said, I don't generally engage with like low IQ individuals like James Lindsay, but just the other day or just yesterday, he tweeted and he was like, gosh, they're calling Douglas Murray a neocon. And I'm just like, am I the only person who reads books or like knows anything anymore? Because he wrote a book called Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. And it's like, and you're accusing people.
How dare you?
Ryan, like, for you've been in this game
this
for
guy
a while
has
too.
A record. Yeah, it's on the record.
What? If someone was like, "Hey, Douglas Murray's a neocon," you'd be like, "Yeah, we know, bro. We
he told us that.
Yeah. He told us that. I read that book in high school." But
Saagar, you're very animated this morning. Your mic is still like peaking a little, so see if you
I'm
can
sorry.
turn it
Okay,
down.
all right, I'll turn it down.
Very high function on the
energy.
mic. He needs like a Douglas Murray, James Lindsay button on his microphone for when he gets mad. He hits that, and it just takes
and we go to the proper setting to bring back the NPR tones. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, with all that being said, let's get to the markets. I'm just gonna pull up the CNBC main page now so we can see. It's 9:15 a.m. Markets at open in 15 minutes. We can take a look at the futures. So also this headline has been important. Jamie Dimon says he expects S&P 500 earnings estimates to fall as companies pull guidance. And apparently Jamie Dimon like basically runs the country since he's the one that Trump allegedly listened to about the potential for a recession. You can see here up at the top though, futures basically flat at this point. But Saagar, let me throw it to you a little bit here for what we saw yesterday. Originally, obviously, Trump makes his announcement, okay, we're keeping the tariffs on China. What are they now? 145%.
Yes,
But we're
145%.
rolling back other tariffs to quote unquote just 10%, except for Canada and Mexico, which are staying with whatever they were before. Markets get really excited. There's a huge gain, one of the largest single day gains in history. And then the next day looked very different. So a lot of those gains rolled back. And then overnight, we were seeing some really troubling indications in terms of bonds, in terms of basically the world being like, I don't know if the US economy is really the place where we want to put our money with any regard. So, Saagar, why don't you go ahead and speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. Is my mic okay now? I'm talking a little bit.
Yeah,
Is
it's
this
better. Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Sounds. I apologize, everyone. I'm still a boomer in terms of my home setup. Yeah, the dollar. There's been some major sell-off in the dollar. It's actually one of the most important things that's happening aside to the bond market. The dollar is at one of its lowest levels for international currencies, including in the European Union. This is not necessarily like de-dollarization, but is generally like a loss of confidence in reserve currency. I don't want to overstate the case, but obviously with trade instability, that's going to be a big part of it. The bond market continues to be a big problem. And the funny thing is it wouldn't be as much of a problem if the administration had not said from day one that their stated goal was to lower the yield on the 10-year, specifically to try and reduce the amount of debt servicing that would require from the federal government. And so the fact that the bonds have spiked in terms of the yield, and actually even the 90-day reduction did not have any general reaction on the price, basically means that the administration's strategy is failing on all fronts. From the bond strategy, we also have like this attempt to try and the attempt is to try and isolate China with the rest of the world. So not only do we still continue to have the 10% tariff, but we're actually starting to see some interesting deals getting cut. Right. So you could see there that you brought it back about the long-term yields. But I actually think one of the more interesting stories is about this European Union side deal that's been cut with China. So actually the last 24 hours has been very clarifying for U.S. markets. And that's why I don't really think it's a surprise that we saw such a significant reduction overall yesterday. And yeah, as you said, it's 9:15 here on the East Coast. We have a general decent idea of where things are. And the S&P basically is flat to yesterday. So, the total bump, quote unquote, from the 90-day pause, it's like maybe 4 to 5%. I mean, don't forget, we're still almost 15, 17% down from the all-time high on the S&P 500. And
art of the deal.
There's still some, they're art of the deal. That's right. Art of the deal.
Ryan, one of the things this morning, so China announced they're lifting tariffs to, I think, 125%. But they also said, and I think this is part of why futures are basically flat up a little bit. They also were like, that's all we're doing. Like, whatever Trump does, like, we're just staying here. We're not doing this whole tit for tat thing. And so I don't know, I guess that's giving people comfort of like, well, I guess it's not going to get worse than it already is. But I also saw, I think Weisenthal was tweeting that the like discount store Five and Below canceled all their orders from China. Five Below. Yeah, Five Below.
Right, because you can't sell it for Five Below. Yeah.
It's I have to say they have some kind of cool stuff in there. Anyway,
it's
if you ever need a gift, like a white elephant gift or something, it's a great place to go. I've bought a lot of stupid shit from there before.
Yeah. But anyway, Ryan, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the China dynamics here, because I feel like there's a lot of overconfidence among the leadership of this country that we're positioned to win a trade war with China, whilst also fighting trade wars apparently with the rest of the world.
I don't know where that confidence comes from. China has basically, all of the cards, as Trump likes to put it. Like, they have everything. They have the treasuries. They have the manufacturing capacity. They have the supply chains. We buy things from them. Like, that's our entire leverage. And if they can find audiences, consumer bases for that manufacturing capacity, then we're screwed. And so they're already pivoting domestically. They have 1 billion plus people. They're trying to grow their domestic consumer base. There's the European Union. There's Southeast and South Asia. They have political problems with all of these different entities of various ranges, but nothing like what they have with us. So it makes their differences with Southeast Asia, pale in comparison to us. And just so people understand the profound implications of these yield numbers going up. I remember when I was taking the Series 7 like 25 years ago or whatever, one of on the bond
Why
section.
did you take the Series 7, Ryan?
I was a broker. I was a
He was a
broker
broker.
back in
Right,
early
you can
2000s.
manage
Chairman
my
Graham.
assets.
When?
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
you've lived like 8 lifetimes.
I have.
How is this
Yeah.
possible?
Right out of
What year was that?
college.
What year was that, Ryan?
2000, 2000,
Oh, okay.
2001.
So the
Yeah.
dot-com crash got you out of the business. Got it.
I was
Yeah.
I was there while it happened. Basically, it was actually
Ryan, the
I
finance
got there a little
bro.
bit after.
I did not
Yeah.
see this.
That's wild.
this
That's my
backstory
first
for you
article
at all.
ever. Yeah, my first article ever was an expose of the place where I worked.
Oh,
which,
that
fits.
Don't
fits.
hire this man.
Yeah.
which was it was a mobbed up shop, and they're like, they're gonna kill you for this. I was like, no, they're not gonna kill me, and they didn't kill me. But on the Series 7,
Still here.
like this is a key thing, that there's a seesaw effect with bond prices and interest rates. When bond prices go up, interest rates go down. When bond prices go down, interest rates go up, because when you need to entice people with a higher interest rate to get them in. And so it's supply and demand. When there's more demand for a bond, the price of it goes up. And so when people sell stocks, they move money. This is the orthodoxy. When people sell stocks, they move money into bonds, because there's now more people trying to buy bonds. The price comes up and the interest rate goes down. And that was what the Trump administration was counting on, that if you tank the stock market, you drive up the price of bonds, and then you reduce the interest rate, and then boom, when we roll over all of our debt payments are going to go down. But something broke. The orthodoxy is not working. People sold out of the market, and they're going somewhere else. They're also selling their bonds. Japan selling a bunch of bonds.
A lot of it is into gold, by the way. Gold
Mhm.
prices are going up and up. So,
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot going
And
on.
they're looking for
but
equity around the world too.
that's right. And so,
somewhere other than the U.S. that they can
Other
stash
than
their
the
money. So
US.
we are screwed.
Well, so yeah, I mean, throughout the week, I've probably had a different take from you guys, and that like this stuff is so hard to predict to the point that Ryan just made. It's kind of like jury's still out. And I think Saagar just said the last 24 hours have been clarifying. That is, I mean, what we're starting to see is, maybe this is no surprise, but the Trump administration said this is going to be a bet. We're gonna, as we do this 90-day pause, we're gonna just jack up the China tariffs, and this is going to force countries, and Weisenthal pointed this out, like Cambodia and Vietnam, to choose finally between the United States and China. Nobody can have it both ways anymore, and so this is going to bring a rash of investment back into the U.S., and it's going to be great. Everyone's going to be happy. And I do think there's just been a lack of evidence of any of that happening. It's not like that's not shocking or controversial, but they are not able to point to very many examples. And this is something we saw this in a CNN. Wasn't this a CNN panel last night where like actually pointing to examples of how this has panned out over the last week, like investments that have actually come into the United States, deals with those 75 countries that have actually been struck. Listen, I'm still open to hearing great deals are coming through with these countries, because we do have the leverage over things like the EU, but they can also just decide to go to China. And if the EU decides to go to China,
that's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
And that's the bet. That was the bet.
And think about it. But like, if that's the bet you're going to make, okay, then why are you running around the world like insulting everyone needlessly and, picking fights with Denmark and sending JD Vance to like shake his finger at the Europeans for their censorious ways, which there's some legitimate critiques there, but then, you have no room to talk given what you're doing back home. Right. And so if you wanted to do this intelligently, which Saagar was saying this yesterday, like in some ways, I hate even indulging an intelligent conversation about this because there is no intelligence behind this. Right. If you wanted to do this intelligently and you wanted to force the world to pick between you and China, and you actually wanted to win in that, why would you tariff the entire world? Right. Why would you go around insulting all of these people, picking a fight with Canada, picking a fight with Denmark over Greenland, picking a fight with the EU? No, you would want to isolate China. You would want to try to make that deal appealing for your allies. And they've done the total opposite of that. I think part of it comes from Trump's, like, he's an old man, and his formative years when he was like at the peak of his powers were like the 80s and early 90s. Okay. The US is in a very different position now. The world has moved on, right? We have a true economic competitor in China who is in many ways surpassing us at this point, especially on technological development and their ability to, build and deliver for their own people and have some sort of like unity and program and long-term thinking behind all of that. And it just seems to me like he didn't reckon with any of that because, you know, I'm not a financial genius. I never took the Series 7. I'm looking at this all from like a political macro perspective. And it does not surprise me at all that as the stock market is tanking and as we are taking these insane like positions and total chaos, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're big, they're small, they're whatever, we're doing it again in 90 days, that the rest of the world is going, like we already were moving in the direction of moving away from the dollar. Did we learn nothing from the fact that we threw every sanction in the book at Russia and they were like, yeah, we're still okay. Like we were able to manage that. And China is so much better positioned than Russia and such a wealthier place to be able to withstand what we have to throw at them.
Well, I just want to say quickly, like so Scott Bessent was making the point on Tucker last week that a lot of the market dips started with DeepSeek, which is super interesting if you're making this bet about China. And
True.
I think the reason that they were doing the penguin tariffs and the reason that they were like being so chaotic, I'm not saying that there was like a method to the madness. I think people were on different pages. I think Trump allowed that to happen because he was like, the more people have no idea what my strategy is, the more that they bet with the United States. It creates this complete state of total chaos and uncertainty, and we are the steady hand. And we're
the steady. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding?
Compared to China,
shaking the world.
Compared to China, but this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying with the Bessent point. He's making the point that the DeepSeek leap is baked into the market decline at the same time as they're saying the uncertainty will cause people to bet on the United States. I think there's something, if you are Canada or Mexico and you were treated a little bit differently in all of this, but still got some attacks. Although I know we have yesterday, Trump said nice things about Queen Claudia Scheinbaum, friend of the show.
Everybody stands. Yeah, apparently.
Yeah,
he's part of that 95% approval rating she has or whatever.
But for some people, like for some countries, there's logic for Trump flexing his muscles and saying, you don't want to be doing this with China. Like this is the US. You're safer with us. Well, it's not turning out that way.
One thing I just want to put on quickly just to show you guys like why China is so much better positioned is this story, which I was just reading this morning. This will not really make sense to most people, but this is an example of what real state capacity looks like. So JD.com, for people who don't know, is one of the biggest companies in the Fortune or in the Global 500. And it is, according to the Wall Street Journal here, what the Chinese government has said is that this is effectively like forcing Amazon to then pump $27 billion of money into their economy to force that company to buy exclusively Chinese products and to boost their domestic manufacturing. So I just want to show people, like, when you have a wholesome strategy, you can absorb 125% tariffs. If this was a strategy that was pushing something like this, I would be behind it. But I don't see a dollar for dollar investment credit here being pushed in the United States. Instead, the Trump administration currently endorsed a $1 trillion cut from the United States government budget, while we're also simultaneously increasing the Pentagon budget by $150 billion. So there is actually a reduction in state capacity under the
cutting
DOGE
taxes.
project. Yeah, DOGE project, cutting taxes, reducing state capacity. We're actually cutting manufacturing tax credits and extending them for corporations, all while trying to levy a massive tariff. China, on the other hand, when they absorb a massive tariff, what do? They're like, hey, JD.com, aka Amazon or retailer or whatever. They're like, you're pumping $27 billion into the economy. And they can do that to every single company in their entire country. Simultaneously, they don't have some idiot Jerome Powell just like reading the tea leaves on a magic 8-ball. They're like, the rates are getting cut now. They don't have Congress. They can just pump money into their economy. They are 10x better positioned, in my opinion, right now than we are because of these cross-cutting forces. All of this is actually possible in a democratic system, but it would require a whole of government approach, manufacturing tax credits, and more. And I think that is really the most like black-pilling thing about all of this. And yeah, just reading that, I'm like in awe that they can just go, imagine summoning Bezos the way that they imprisoned that guy, what was it, Jack Ma? And they're like, yeah, you're putting 27 billion off the top. It's going straight into the economy. There's no yes or no. They're just like, this is what you're doing. And in that, my admiration for that is that it's, yes, often they use their authoritarianism capriciously and to crack down on whatever. But like in this sense, it is so obviously intelligent in knowing exactly how to make sure that the Chinese customer is not, broadly affected, keeping their supply chain. They don't care if it's going to impact JD's stock or JD.com stock, which ironically, it actually went up as a result of this. But
yeah, during the
like,
yeah.
but I'm just saying they don't care about these short-term, even quarter by quarter basis, and that's why they're well positioned for strength. And frankly, even more like the autarkic protectionist vision that the Trump administration wants. You can have that, but then you have to do stuff like this, and you'd have to do it via Congress. You'd actually have to endorse a $1 trillion investment tax credit that would be giving to all of companies that want to build in the United States. Phase-ins. But you need then, you can't be cutting the EPA. A friend of mine, I'm very into nuclear energy, just sent me this. Doge is trying to axe the entire team that would be responsible for greenlighting new nuclear reactors, right? So what are we doing here? That's actually about, abundance. We talk a lot about abundance. That's a key part, I think, of the abundance agenda. Meanwhile, over there, everything is so vertically integrated that, yes, they obviously have inefficiency. But whenever it's like hyper-focused on something very important, they're ready to spring into action. They've studied the U.S. economic playbook for years. Russia is the greatest thing that ever happened to them. They got to battle test it, and they got to observe exactly how it all works. I remember screaming this at the time. I said, why? Why would you blow it all here on a stupid conflict like Russia and Ukraine whenever China is just sitting there and watching this entire thing
we
evolve?
talked about this.
Yeah.
We talked about this.
For years.
I mean, Ryan,
years.
we can't beat the Houthis in Yemen.
Yeah.
We can't, we stayed in Afghanistan for 20 plus years, and then the Taliban just immediately, we think we're going to be able to go toe to toe with China at this point. I'm sorry. It's delusional.
Yeah. And we're shocked at what China has been able to build development wise from 2000 up until 2025. And we're like, China is cheating us. We are such victims. How on earth could China have done this to us? We never should have let them into WTO, and PNTR was such a mistake. It's like, well, what did the U.S. spend its trillions of dollars on from 2000 until today? We spent all of our money in Iraq and Afghanistan. And during the Cold War, the U.S. actually did have the capacity to organize its foreign and corporate policy in a uniform-ish way, similar to how China can today, because the parties agreed on what U.S. foreign policy ought to be, taking on the Soviet Union, establishing American hegemony, and the corporate CEOs were on board. They would just pick up a phone, all right, these are your marching orders, and the corporations, they would, not China style, but they would follow the directions that they were getting from a White House that had the buy-in from the other party. Now Trump is fighting a two-front war. He's trying to basically eradicate the Democratic Party and all of its constituent elements with universities, research, union, teachers unions, federal workers. He's trying to basically destroy his domestic enemies, while he is also then waging trade war on all of these countries around the world. And that means you don't have a unified center of power on which to take on China. You can't, maybe he can win, a 285 front war, but it's a little bit more difficult.
We also have a corporate class compared to mid-century post-war period that is wildly
they're
more
not pro-American. They're global. Yeah.
And they're so much more powerful. I mean, you have somebody like Mark Zuckerberg running a company that is significantly more powerful than most countries
right, and he
in the
speaks
world.
Chinese. He's not gonna be like, all right, let's rally around the flag. He's like, what flag?
Yeah, Elon
global
too.
company.
Yeah,
same.
Yeah. I mean,
Elon,
the vast majority of Meta users are not American. People forget that. It's actually not. I mean, it's American flagship company, but the absolute I think they have 3 billion users. So you do math. I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out what percentage of people do use their platform. Just broadly, I think Ryan is absolutely correct. And on all of this, look, I mean, I don't want to understate the great strengths of the United States. The one thing we have going for us is that we are the greatest consumer market in the history of the world. probably not a good thing, but that does mean that we have a lot of leverage.
Shout out Five
over,
Below.
Yeah, shout out to Five Below. And I mean, listen, that's what makes America tick. Who am I to say otherwise? TJ Maxx, Home Goods, and all this other stuff. And a lot of that does come from China, so they're obviously going to have an effect. I'm not going to say they won't make it. It's just like the Russians. No one will say that the Russians are materially better off than whenever they invaded Ukraine. But the idea that you can just overnight like crush them or something when they have such incredible state capacity in China, and they also have their own ability to act, as well as a much more unified population. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this, but that JD clip of him calling the Chinese peasants, talking about Chinese peasants, that has gone massively viral in China.
Yeah.
Massively viral. On I forget what it's called, Weibo or something like that.
Yeah.
And the state censors are actually, usually they crush clips that get circulated around. They're like, oh, let fly. And that is rocketed
some of the
around
state
the entire country.
Spokespeople are sharing old clips of Mao being like, we will never give in. It's like, oh boy.
Right.
And I mean, but that's a real phenomenon. Like, look at what happened in Canada with the trade war. Suddenly, it flipped politics on its head. The conservative dude was ready to romp, and now Carney, the liberal, has an 80% chance of being the next prime minister. Like, there was like a spark of Canadian nationalism, maybe at like historic levels. And it's going to be the same thing in China. Like, they are unified behind, we're going to win. Our country is not unified, but our country does not want this. If you had to vote, I mean, I think a majority of probably even Republicans would be like, I don't know about this direction, but certainly a majority of the public, based on all of the polling that we've seen. Trump himself, he has squandered, like, his honeymoon period is over. The approval ratings now are back down to where they were in the first term, low 40s. You know, he has expended the sort of like political capital that he had accumulated with an impressive victory and, you know, Republican wins and all of that sort of stuff. Like, that's over and gone. So even just in terms of the political positioning, they're in much better shape. The last thing, just before we move on, because the picture has changed just in the time that we've been speaking, the markets are now open, and you can see there's, you know, that they're down a bit. So, you know, this is going to be, who knows what things are going to look like today as we're moving forward. But
I love that Chiron at the top. Wall Street Wraps, one of the wildest weeks ever.
There you go.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I love giving everybody insight into what the e-commerce folks want me to buy. It's always like work.
Stop seeing
close.
this ad. Oh.
All right. Let's unless you guys have some final thoughts, let's go ahead and get to this Supreme Court ruling that was pretty significant. Anybody, any last thoughts on the tariff economic piece?
No, go ahead.
We're good.
Covered.
Okay. All right. So last week, on Friday, we actually got to talk to the lawyer of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Maryland father, immigrant, deported wrongfully. Administration had admitted, like, they called it an administrative error. He was sent to this prison, this notorious torture dungeon, Bukele's dungeons in El Salvador. And so the administration was like, yeah, we fucked up, but we're not going to do anything about it, and you can't make us. District court judge said, you need to do what you can to get him back. They said you need to facilitate and effectuate his return. Appeals court agreed. Went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court initially issued an administrative stay saying, okay, well, the deadline that you have to bring him back tonight, like, we're putting that on hold because we're going to take a look at this. And now we have their answer, and it's pretty remarkable because all 9 justices sided with the lower courts, saying you have to, and this wording again is key, facilitate Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return from this prison in El Salvador. So again, everyone from Justice Alito and Justice Thomas to, you know, Sonia Sotomayor, they all were on board with this. It's an unsigned order. And as I mentioned, these 2 terms are important. Effectively, what the order here from the court said is they have to facilitate his return, but the district court needs to clarify the term effectuate to make sure that it is not overstepping its bounds with regard to the executive's prerogative to conduct foreign policy. The lower court has now amended its order to just take out the term effectuate. So I think this is being seen rightfully so as a major victory, certainly for this, you know, for this individual for his family. Also an indication of, the Supreme Court's willingness to stand up to this administration on some fronts. But I also don't want to celebrate here too early, Ryan, because what does it technically mean to facilitate his return? Like, if the Trump administration just goes to Bukele and is like, wink, wink, nod, nod, can you send that guy back? And Bukele's like, sorry, can't do it. Can they go back to the court and be like, oh, well, we tried, we did our best, and what can be done? I guess he just has to stay there now and be tortured and sold on for slave labor for life.
And it's also worth noting that the administration fired the attorney who submitted the brief that acknowledged the administrative error, and which suggests like where they are on this situation. I wonder if it's simply that they do not want this guy giving interviews if he comes back and talking about the conditions of the prison that he's been living in. To prevent that, I suppose they could facilitate his return, put him in detention, and then deport him somewhere. Just keep him indefinitely in detention and while they try to either get the stay lifted on the ability to deport him to El Salvador, or try to deport him to some other country that would take him, or maybe to send him to Guantanamo. There are all kinds of like evil options, that Stephen Miller has before him, and so which to me means it's probably unlikely that they're going to do the non-evil one, which would be our apologies. Please send this guy back, and then if they want to go through a deportation process, they can do that, but do it on the up and up.
One thing I wanted to flag here while you guys were talking was this. A friend of mine, I just wanted your guys' thoughts. My friend Jason Willick says this, quote, "It is probably not unintentional that the SCOTUS order refers explicitly to Abrego Garcia's release from custody rather than his return to the United States." Is that what you guys saw in this? Because it says the order properly requires the government to facilitate release from custody and to ensure his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador.
I don't think so, because the thing is, he is specifically barred from being sent to El Salvador, specifically. Right. That was what what is it called? Like an order, withholding order, something like that.
Temporary hold, I think is what it's called.
So it's specifically, that's where they messed up, is they could have gone through the court process. He has an ongoing asylum claim too, that, his attorney at least thought that he had a good shot at prevailing, and whether or not that's the case, we don't really know. But, they had found, okay, you've got credible fear, you can go through the asylum process. So he has an ongoing asylum case, but specifically the judge said he cannot be deported to this particular country. So if you're just releasing him from custody, you are still in very clear, blatant violation of what a U.S. judge had prohibited and what this administration admitted they were prohibited from doing. So I think I don't, maybe I'm missing something. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that doesn't follow logically to me. What to me more of the gray area is sort of similar to how the Supreme Court had ruled, all right, you can go forward for now with this Alien Enemies Act while, this is working its way through the lower courts, but you have to provide some level of due process. They have to be able to file habeas petitions, and they have to be given, quote unquote, reasonable notice. But they left it to the administration to define, well, what do we consider to be reasonable notice? So I sort of feel like this is a similar deal where it's like you're leaving it to the administration to determine what does it mean to, quote unquote, facilitate his return. And I think Ryan is 100% right. I mean, I think it's not just that they don't want him back and going on 60 Minutes and talking about the reality. I think it's also, they want to maintain the image that we can just send you if you want. They want to maintain that hardline image and that there's no recourse. And they certainly don't want people really getting a sense like, they've called him, they've alleged he's a human trafficker and like a leader in MS-13. There is just zero evidence to support any of that. And so they certainly don't want the public to get a look at this, seemingly innocent man with no criminal record that they sent to be indefinitely tortured.
I think it's the latter, Krystal. Go ahead, Emily. You can
I was going to say, Saagar, is Jason making the point that they could get Mexico to accept him
I
right?
don't know.
Like that's
I did not understand because I was like, well, as an El Salvadoran citizen, I was like, so would they just release him from custody? And I was, but if that's how the uh,
that seems plausible that they could
yeah,
say, okay, legally we can deport him to Mexico if Mexico will take him.
But
and
but
that's
it also says in the order, though, if you want to put that back up on the screen, it also says the case has to be handled as if this had never happened. So it says the language is such like you have to go back to what you would have done, and handle this in the way that it would have been handled had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. So I certainly, he can't just be deported without, again, some sort of due process. There was no due process here. That would be in violation of the other thing that the Supreme Court said that indicates you have to give these people due process.
So they'd have to bring him back, give him a habeas petition in Texas or Louisiana or whatever. Right. That makes sense.
That's what's interesting about this particular case is that one of the reasons they're sending Venezuelans to El Salvador is because obviously Venezuela is not accepting deportations. And so I think the administration, the error here, and it is incredibly stupid, is that they didn't realize his petition specifically was barring him from going back because of the asylum claim of credible fear. And so I think they keep trying to make the point that they can boot people to wherever they want to boot people so long as that country accepts them, because they're struggling to do the quote mass deportations. And one of the ways that they're able to get more deportations is having Bukele, for example, just take in people who are Venezuelan. So, I mean, I wonder if they will pursue some other deportation option. I don't know the legality of it, but I think that's what Jason was saying.
I think the reason that they won't admit it is because it takes off the veneer. Right now, obviously, the administration has lost a lot of credibility. I actually think, Krystal, did you guys cover the case, the MS-13 case here in Virginia? The one where this is important.
Where they, I was going to pull it. So talk while I'm actually looking for that right now.
This is an important case because the administration keeps trying to do these flagship arrests where they'll be like, this guy, MS-13, literally here, not far from where I live, they arrested this guy and they're like, he's a major leader of MS-13. They charged him with all of this. The governor of Virginia was there. The Secretary of Homeland Security was there. Like, this was a major event. And then in the charging documents, basically all they said in the charging documents was like, we caught him in possession of an illegal firearm. Okay, I mean, listen, fine, but that is a crime and definitely, it'll get you sent to prison. Not necessarily an MS-13 quote gang leader. And it seems that the administration now is going to be dropping the case and instead pursuing deportation. Now, okay, like you can pursue deportation based on like, oh, he was charged or whatever with a possession of an illegal firearm, but that's pretty far from human trafficking, orchestrating murders, and being a gang leader. And it's pretty obvious that either A, bad intelligence, or B, this was literally just like made up, like it was a PR stunt. And I think that is now what's happening, where if you see in the case here of Abrego Garcia, and the government has to admit in writing and then facilitate the return, everyone's going to be, because there's a lot of MAGA people who are still like, oh, it just doesn't matter, whatever, you come here legally, etc. They're going to be like, well, hold on. Like, if you have to bring somebody back because you screwed up, it's like, well, how many other screw ups are there in the bundle, right? And so
not to mention,
go ahead.
It makes it clear. Like, there's nothing about this just grab someone and throw them in the prison that would preclude U.S. citizens or anyone else from being caught up in that as well. But I mean, to your point, Saagar, about this guy, like, they did a whole thing. And he's the East Coast leader of MS-13. Okay, well, don't you want to have that guy in prison? Because if you just deport him and he doesn't serve any time in prison, what's to stop him from coming right back? So, even Fox News was giving Caroline Leavitt a hard time about this one because they're thinking about it from that perspective of like, if this guy's such a big criminal, like, of course you want to prosecute him. Of course you want to get him behind bars. So let me just play a little that exchange so you guys can hear how that went down.
Can you shed some light on this? Because it was a story that we all covered, that he was the East Coast leader of MS-13. So what was the evidence that supported that proclamation by the Department of Justice and the FBI?
Here at the White House, we applaud the Attorney General Pam Bondi, our FBI Director Kash Patel, for working hand in hand with local law enforcement on the ground in the Commonwealth of Virginia to detain and arrest this MS-13 ringleader. There was sufficient evidence to do so, and now the case is in the hands of the Department of Homeland Security, who will be deporting this individual from our country. These agencies are working together in a collaborative way to follow President Trump's directive to eradicate MS-13 and foreign terrorists from United States soil. So this is an individual who was detained and arrested because of the president's policies, and he will no longer be residing in the United States of America. And our
I'm just trying to get some clarity on it, Caroline, because, if indeed he is what we were told he is, the East Coast leader of MS-13, wouldn't it make sense to prosecute him for crimes related to that? I know he was held on a gun charge, but to make sure that any victims of MS-13 through his leadership get their day in court here in the United States, and then send him to an El Salvadoran prison if he is deported and found guilty on those crimes.
Well, again, this administration is doing things differently, Martha, and this president has made a directive to his agencies, particularly the Department of Homeland Security, to remove foreign terrorists from America's homeland to protect American citizens. And we have an incredible diplomatic relationship with the president of El Salvador and his government, who have been detaining these MS-13 ringleaders and violent gang members in their prisons. And American taxpayers don't have to foot the bill for that cost. And so, again, the bottom line
the Supreme Court said that the Alien Act could be used to remove people, but they had to reach due process first. I'm only pressing on this because it was a huge story and we covered it. Obviously, it would feel like that person could lead to a lot of other evidence. The DOJ would be pressing to see this in court so that other people could be exposed. And suddenly none of that's happening. So can you explain why the change of course in this particular case?
She doesn't explain the change of course, but in any case, that's, in Fox News, like, okay, if this guy's such a big deal, what are we doing here?
I do at least appreciate that, because they got fooled, right? They sent camera crews out there, like they took it seriously. They covered the arrest. They made this into a huge thing. And you're like, so what? You just drugged me out there to cover a gun charge? You know how many gun charges there are in this country? It's like, be serious, right? And look, okay, you want to deport somebody for a gun charge? Okay, yeah, fine. But going around federal cases, like acting like this is some Rico mob boss, and then just saying, oh, actually, we're going to drop the case. We don't actually have to prove any of this stuff in court. There's a huge credit. I'm going to use an old school Vietnam term, which Ryan will love. Credibility gap. There's a credibility gap that is opening with this White House.
But wait until Fox News gets a hold of DropSite. This is me teeing it over to Ryan, because that's what should really be infuriating. I mean, it infuriates me. The way there are clearly deals being struck and these guys are being used as pawns in a bigger drug war.
Yeah, Ryan, I read this story and I still don't fully get it. So can you just explain it?
So basically what's going on here, and we don't know if this is exactly what's going on with this kid yet, because he's 24. And so Bukele and MS-13 struck a deal back around 2019 where Bukele would give better prison conditions to MS-13 members who were already locked up, and other favors. You can see this story that Jose Olivares and I wrote for DropSite News. And in exchange, they would stop killing and kidnapping people. And this is not an uncommon tactic among South American or Central American presidents too. FMLN had tried to do the same thing, like back in 2011 or something like that. Part of the deal was that then MS-13 would support Bukele in his next election, and they did that, and he won in a landslide. And then you saw this kind of breakdown of the deal, and he's become this much more aggressive anti-gang dude, and so he has denied up and down that these negotiations ever took place, but the negotiations absolutely did take place. And so there has been this push and pull, tug of war between the U.S. and Bukele. Bukele wants all of the MS-13 members who know about these negotiations in his dungeon. He does not want them in open court in the United States talking openly about the negotiations that they had with Bukele, which are a real lightning rod a real political lightning rod in El Salvador. They wouldn't get attention here, but if they had testify in court up here in the United States, it would get a lot of coverage in El Salvador. And he generally has the media locked down. But if this, the media would cover something that happened in a U.S. courtroom in El Salvador, so this would be a big problem for him. So the price that Bukele demanded to take these Venezuelans was, I also want these MS-13 guys that I've been trying to get from you and that you've been keeping from me. And so that's why we sent MS-13 people along with these Venezuelans. So, and in order to send them, they had to dismiss the charges. And they did that with a bunch of them, back when they first sent them down. So that's what this looks like. We don't know the details yet. He would have been like 18 when these negotiations were going on. So maybe he has, knowledge of the negotiations subsequent. Or they just stitched up some random guy in Virginia and the thing is all now falling apart. But that's the backdrop, that it could be part of this MS-13 leadership roundup that Bukele wants Trump to help him effectuate and facilitate.
Interesting. Wow. Crazy stuff.
Emily, you're muted.
You're
You're muted, Emily. Not working? Okay. It's all good.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let's talk
All right.
quickly here about Mahmoud Khalil, because this was important too. So, the administration has made it pretty clear for a while that, they have never said that Mahmoud Khalil, who of course was the Columbia student, legal permanent resident, green card holder, who was arrested by ICE and shipped down to, was he Louisiana? I believe he was shipped down to.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the real first big high profile case of like, anyone who said anything about Israel that we didn't like, we're going to round them up. If they're, here on a visa or a green card holder or whatever, we're going to round them up and we're going to detain them and we're going to deport them. He was the first big high profile example of that. And the administration has never argued that he committed any crimes, even though many of their defenders have insinuated or insisted that this was because of illegal activity. They have never indicated that. And so the court has been asking them to provide their evidence of why they believe that he should be deported. And effectively, so the government files, this submission, and there is really no there. I've got the key paragraph here. He says, pursuant to these authorities, I've determined the activities and presence of these aliens in the U.S. would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences, would compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest. These determinations are based on information provided by the DHS, ICE, HSI regarding the participation and role of someone else, we don't know, and Khalil in anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities which foster a hostile environment for Jewish students in the U.S. My determination for the other person is also based on some other citations for unlawful activity during these protests, but that's not Khalil. That's this other person they're claiming engaged in unlawful activities. The public actions and continued presence of these two in the U.S. undermine U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world in the U.S., in addition to efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the United States. So literally the only thing that they cite here for Mahmoud Khalil, Saagar, is his participation in what they describe as anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities.
Interesting, isn't it? Definitely also fits with our anti-Semitic screening that we're doing now. Ryan, I'm sure you saw that story.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, do we have the ICE thing? I haven't gotten to react to this yet. The
Oh,
thing
the
about ideas.
Stop ideas. Oh, I'll
yeah,
pull that
Ryan,
up.
you talk while I pull it up. All right, let me find that.
No, like they asked, they were told they have to come up with some evidence that he did something wrong. What's your case? Why is this permanent resident married to an American citizen whose wife is about to give birth in indefinite detention without charge? And they finally came back with, because Marco Rubio can lock up anybody he wants who isn't a citizen for any reason. And the reason that he's claiming is that he's anti-Semitic, which is wild, because he could bring, if they actually wanted to try that, which apparently they don't think they have to, he could bring countless, it sounds like, Jewish colleagues of his from Colombia.
That's right.
Yep.
To be
They've
like,
already
he
submitted
fought
letters.
anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they've
he
already
fought
submitted
anti-Semitism.
letters attesting to his character, and he was going to Shabbat dinners. He was fighting anti-Semitic when there was somebody who did say something anti-Semitic. He was the first to intervene. So polar opposite of the way that he's being portrayed.
Right, which leaves them just to argue, well, if you're critical of Israel, we believe that is anti-Semitism.
Bingo, exactly. So as you guys can see on the screen, this was a real thing that was put out by ICE. Quote, if it crosses the border illegally, it's our job to stop it. People, money, products. Okay, understand. Ideas. Hold on a second. What? Whoa.
Can we talk about that last one?
What was that last one? Ideas? Like, what does that mean exactly? If it crosses our border illegally, ideas. How does an idea illegally cross the U.S. border? Now we're entering some difficult territory, aren't we, Ryan?
In the
that's
trunk
where
of the car, yeah,
in the trunk of our car, I've got
smuggling in
some
your
shine bomb
dangerous
literature.
ideas.
Yeah, what is
I
it? What's
think
like the
Trump would be
biggest
cool
book
with
in
that,
Mexico?
apparently.
Yeah,
What magic does
think.
this woman have, though, for real? I don't know. We're all referring to this. Trump in the Oval Office was like, she's a fantastic woman. She's doing a great job. We had a wonderful time. She's very dignified.
She's very elegant.
Very elegant.
I think he probably
word,
just has good. She probably is just a good diplomat. She probably talks to him well on the phone. I mean, honestly, I can't really think of a alternative. But Emily, we're talking about ICE saying that they want to stop dangerous ideas from entering the country. We just put that graphic up from yesterday, and you're just.
I mean, I know it's the most
cartoonish.
And that's the thing. It's like it's the most obvious point to make. But can you imagine if the Biden-Harris administration had done half of the you cannot imagine, there would be such a meltdown over it, and understandably so. Like, it is truly un-American. It is a truly un-American thing to say and position to hold. And then the fact that you are clearly, we also just put up the Mahmoud Khalil court filing that's like, oh, he was at a protest, that's why we're going to deport him. No allegations of illegality. No, even I thought they'd come up with something he said that was a little edgy, that they could put in the nope, none of that. Just like he was.
Yeah, they didn't even put like
people
from the river to the sea. They didn't even be like the well-known anti-Semitic phrase from the river to the sea.
Well, that is their definition.
Well,
I mean, they said like even by their own definition, right? So they've accepted that definition. So they haven't even used that successfully. It's just the ideas thing. If you flip it around and you see the Biden administration coming in and using this on Christians or people who are opposed, like TERFs. I mean, it's just like the possibilities are endless. The mind boggles. But
we do need some more TERFs. We need more TERFs.
Oh, by all means.
I call for more TERFs.
But this is so. When I was reading through the document that they submitted in evidence, the Rubio memo, I was just like, it's so. It's not surprising, but they really do have nothing.
Well, and Ryan, they had said some maybe Pam Bondi, I don't remember. One of these people said that the reason he was being deported was because he aligned with Hamas. This document doesn't even mention Hamas.
Right.
Oh, good point.
That was the DHS spokeswoman, Tricia McLaughlin, who said that.
Right. They can't even prove that. Or
you guys want to know what's funny?
Attempt to demonstrate.
You know where Tricia came from? She used to work for Vivek, Mr. Ideas and Mr. Debate. I'm just saying. Some of us remember things. These are it's a curse to actually remember anything in this business and just be like, what the fuck are you talking? Imagine
she mixes it up.
Yeah, it's like you went from that to we need to ban ideas. And
can I say
such a great point, Krystal, about the Hamas thing is they didn't even mention that. They just said he was anti-Semitic. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, no, but that's why this is all so frustrating because, Krystal, do you remember we interviewed Mamadou Tall on the show back in... Mm-hmm. Well, his case is interesting because after he had gotten his visa, he had been tweeting things about how the U.S. empire, he hates the U.S. empire, his goal in life is bringing down the U.S. empire. And he's like the one person from all of these cases, like Ozturk, for example, and Op-Ed. He's the one person from all these cases where I'm like, granted, he'd said all of that after he got the visa, but I was like, could you have sussed that out in your interviews with him? Like, did you know that he wasn't super pro-America when you said, here's a student visa? Like, there are arguments that would be within the realm of like reasonable debate, and these are not them. These are like insane examples of op-eds and trying to tie him to these posters that were handed out at protests, trying to tie him to protests that got like violent. He wasn't there. He didn't do it. I mean, it's
Wasn't-
crazy.
You know,
Wasn't
it's
with
funny.
with Khalil, wasn't there also an allegation that he had lied on his green card application or something
Yes.
like that?
He
Didn't they-
omitted.
Yeah.
That's not here either.
Yeah,
Right.
he omitted
Yeah,
that
there
he
was
had
something
worked
about
for the
for
embassy.
the UN.
For the
No, I
for
thought it was
the-
the UN, like UNRWA.
I thought it was the UK embassy in Beirut.
Well, because he had a joint job, like he had a UK security clearance while he was working for UNRWA,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, I can't imagine why, like, working for the UK would be disqualifying for an American, like somebody applying for a visa in the
Or
United States. Like,
espionage or
what?
something. I don't know.
What are you trying to hide?
Yeah, maybe he's a spook. What if he's a spook? But
He's
no, I don't think so.
there's a British spy. He's 007.
Yes, he's a. No,
Well,
he's a.
they should put that in the application for why he
Yeah,
should be
that'd be
deported then. But
That's a
yeah,
good
I mean,
reason
it
to be
was
deported.
it was thinner. I knew it would be thin because the right has been digging through everything this man has ever said to try to come up with something to paint him as like, oh, he's an anti-Semitic terrorist loving monster. And they came up with nothing. So I knew it would be thin. This was thinner even than I expected because I thought they'd have the thing in there about, oh, he was lying on his application and, oh, he said from the river to the sea and, oh, here's a Hamas pamphlet. Remember, Caroline Levitt did that whole thing of like, I can't even bring that literature into the briefing room because it would
said
be
that to
so
me.
horrible.
She said that to
Oh,
me.
that's
That
right.
was
She
you.
did
Yeah,
say it to you.
that
was you.
I forgot that.
I was like,
and now it's
yeah,
like
for sure.
the horrible literature that we, can't even like the innocence of the American
had to
people would
protect
be
Saagar
ruined
from
if
it.
we saw it.
Yeah,
That's
Saagar's
not even
sensibilities
that's
couldn't
even
handle